All right, let's get started. I'll call this meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance, I think. And also a continuation of the public hearing, which we held on April 2nd. Thank you. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance for this. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So what we're going to do tonight is not start at the very beginning all over again. I think that would be too torturous for everyone. But to try to recap the work that the Board of Finance did after the public hearing, comments relative to items in the budget. I thought it was a very good and healthy conversation, but what we're trying to do with the slide here will be just to recap the series of motions and changes we made. So just, all right. So these are the budgets that were presented at the public hearing on April 2nd. And they're the approved budgets of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed prior to that meeting. So the next thing we did was we discussed all of these and made the following changes. See if I can step out here and talk about it. So that we can get to the point where we'll have budgets that we will recommend to the taxpayers and voters for the referendum. So among the many things we talked about, we agreed to, and all of these passed by the Board of Finance, to increase the investment income estimates. So that's a revenue item. Transfer $850,000 to the health insurance fund from the general fund. So that doing that reduces the expenses, but then we turn around and transfer $850,000 to the health insurance transfer fund. So that is revenue and expense neutral, those two events. We increased the pension expense because we changed the assumed rate of return on the existing investment portfolio from 7 down to 6.75. We removed the use of general fund reserves to pay for paving, which was a recommendation of the Board of Selectmen that was in the budget that was on the previous page. And then we said that we would replace that by funding it, paving with bond funding. So again, that's revenue and expense neutral in the final analysis. However, if we do bond for it, there will be additional costs associated with that, about $60,000. So from a $90,797,641 budget, we ended up with a $91,090,561 budget with those changes. So we also did some things, a lot of discussion about this within the categories of the budget, and we reclassified annual capital expenditures from CNR and capital line items to departmental operating line items. So not to go over this again, but these are expenses that are incurred on an annual basis and are now in the operating budgets of the police department, the public works budget, those two, and they include the police cruisers, the plow truck, and a portion of the paving that was already that was somewhere else. Where was it? Doesn't matter. But it was put into their department from CNR, I believe, right? And then the other thing that was really sort of a housekeeping thing, but we had it needed to be done, was we moved $1 million. We unrestricted $1.5 million of our fund balance that had been originally designated as a reserve, basically an assigned fund balance for loss of revenue from the Hartford property. And with all the development in town subsequent, we are putting that back into the just general fund balance. All right? So the net of all of that is to bring these same budgets sent forward with those changes. And it shows the increase down at the bottom. All right? Is that the last slide? All right. So the impact of that assuming all of those changes that we made, would be to increase the mill rate from 36.42 to 37.49, increase of 1.07 mils or 2.93%. And based on the median home price, the taxes would go up about $228 or 2.93%. All right? So based on that summarization, we are going to reopen the public hearing, take any additional comments, and then the Board of Finance will consider closing the public hearing and further discussion on the decision to recommend these budgets to the taxpayers. So if you'd like to speak, you can come on up. Again, same rules as before. Appreciate it. Joan, anyone else? And be sure you just sign in. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we have 4. That's great. Joan, you can start. And then when the person in front of you is done, be sure you sign in, state your name and address. Thank you.
Thank you. I am concerned, Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. I am concerned that the Board of Finance is either inept or incapable of delivering a spending budget to the residents that is in keeping with their guidance of a 2% increase. The Board of Finance has requested the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education to provide a budget to the taxpayers of Simsbury that follows their guidelines. All finalized budgets developed by the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education are presented to the Board of Finance. It is not the responsibility of the Board of Finance to micromanage the submitted budgets by trying to place a round peg in a square hole. It appears that Chairman Rob Pomeroy does not understand his role in the leadership position of the Board of Finance. It appears he is unprepared or incapable of leading the Board of Finance. It appears that Rob Pomeroy is ill-equipped to grasp the scope of a revenue and spending budget, while the Board of Finance has floundered at each meeting to grasp its entirety. The taxpayers have been ill-served by the Board of Finance that is not willing to demand compliance with their 2% guidance. The taxpayers have been overtaxed for years with a smoke and mirror budget where slush funds are integrated into the budget. Presently, the Board of Selectmen has presented a 5.5% increase. The Board of Education has presented a 2.51% of budget. The total budget as presented will be increased 4.05%. These increases make us uncompetitive for economic development, lowers property values, and places a burden on all businesses in Simsbury. The packets distributed to the Board of Finance for tonight's meeting has all the motions to approve a 4.05% budget. This hearing is a charade since nothing will change. The budget as presented will go to referendum for vote. As presented, I will not vote for the budget with a 4.05% increase in spending. Thank you for listening.
Next.
Dear Board of Finance.
Name and address, please. Sorry.
My name is Maria Ecke, and I live at 8 Glenbrook Road, West Simsbury. And I guess you might say I'm sort of a watchdog for all the silent citizens of Simsbury, most of whom don't even have a clue of the misspending tactics of everyday politics and repercussions that they will have now and in the future. Simsbury was once a vibrant, beautiful, God-given sacred land. So much so that the visionary and great conservator, Governor George McLean, spent most of his life and money to preserve this God's place. I hate to be one of the humans that has anything to do with the placement of hazardous, toxic solar panels that will now sit alongside the McLean Game Refuge, land that the Governor McLean left to preserve nature. I guess it's vision and testimony to the possibilities that can lie in human failure and greed. The studies are now showing the solar panels can leak hazardous, toxic fluids into the ground where they're erected. Please see my studies on your email that I have forwarded. I guess another great scholar who truly loves Simsbury and its God-given beauty was right in his view on politics. Mark Twain quoted, "If our vote made any difference, then they wouldn't let us do it." I guess there are at least two conservators rolling over in their graves at the thought of the abuse of power that has been handed down on Simsbury. In my opinion, if the rumor I hear is true, Simsbury will be receiving a check from the solar panel farm company. That's one check that should never be cashed, because in the near future, it's going to take millions to clean up the environmental mess that the toxic panels are going to cause, not a measly 600,000. Another big Simsbury political flop can be seen and felt in its disastrous results down the road. I'm talking about the development called Ridge at Talcott Mountain. What great minds sat over cocktails and dreamed this menagerie up? Let's build a huge mega complex with toxic building materials, sewers that will eventually leak, and parked automobiles that leak oil and gas. And let's build it right alongside the National Register of Protected Waterways and Simsbury's beautiful Farmington River. In fact, its namesake, Weetog, where they built it, is an Indian word that translates to the land of the beautiful winding river. And on that same note, the developers stole from Simsbury a sacred Indian village that once lived upon the river shores in the exact spot. Many people over the years would spend hours finding numerous Indian artifacts, arrowheads, hatchets, and signs that should have been brought to someone's attention. So this historic plot of land that sits next to the river and beneath the glorious Talcott Mountain should have been placed on the National Register of Historic Places under the National Park Service, which covers Native American sites. Just imagine, Simsbury could have had a federal grant and federal assistance to purchase the land or acquire it through eminent domain. And then the federal government would have surely paid Simsbury and built a museum on it to tell the story of Misako Indians that lived on the river's edge. How many libraries, schools, and people would have come to learn year by year? How much money would that have brought, like the Dinosaur Museum in Rocky Hill?
One minute.
I guess now that's insight. I guess politicians lack true insight. And being a native Bostonian, we had a little proposition. It's called Proposition 2.5, which means that the entire state, and it was voted through, the entire state voted through Proposition 2.5, which means that you cannot raise the taxes more than 2.5% a year. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Michael Wallace, and I live at 79 Gracie Road in Canton, Connecticut. However, I am here as representing the union that the employee that is going to be laid off from. And just to make the board aware of our contract that we currently have in place, I will read to you verbatim. It says, "A layoff is defined as involuntary, non-disciplinary separation an employee from town service." And then the next section, Section B of this says, "Order of layoff. No full-time employee in a position selected for layoff shall be laid off if the town retains a part-time, seasonal, temporary, contractual, or probationary employee in that position. If there is more than one employee in that position, then they will be laid off by seniority, inverse seniority." I do believe what the town's plan was and is to lay off a full-time employee and replace that employee with a couple of part-time employees. I just wanted to make the board aware that the union will grieve that decision going forward. That's all I had to say. I just wanted a point of information.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mike Rinaldi. I live at Pinnacle Mountain Road. I was here the last time. At that time, I did not have a chance to read the budgets. There's no question in my mind that these budgets will pass. The public really doesn't care. They don't show up. They don't know what's going on. They have no voice, even if they did show up. It's sad. The past 20 years, I'm ashamed of what happened to this town. But I know I can't do anything about it. So I'm going to say goodbye. It's sad. I have some statistics, a couple of comments, a couple of recommendations. To the statistics. State of Connecticut has the highest per capita taxation of its residents than any state in the Union, ranked 50th. State of Connecticut, its citizens are the 49th highest per capita indebtedness in the United States of America. Just Illinois is greater. Troubled state, pretty much bankrupt. Its GO bonds, hardly anybody will buy them. The bond rating for the state of Connecticut has had 3 degradations in the past 5 years. Let's talk a little bit about Simsbury. Simsbury has the 14th highest mill rate in the state of Connecticut and the 8th highest equalized tax rate. After the last reevaluation, we improved to 27th highest mill rate. But we actually got worse as far as the equalized tax rate. We're now 7th. Why is that? The mill rate dropped 5%, assessment rates went up 8%. I should be happy, maybe. My home dropped $100,000 in value in 5 years. Nobody wants my house, not at $20,000 a year. That's a problem. Let's talk a little bit about inflation. The inflation rate in 2018 was 2.44%. This year, it's running at a rate of 1.86%. You saw those numbers. There's nowhere near 1.86%. If you were to ask somebody on the Board of Education, how much does it cost to educate a child in Simsbury? They'll say $17,600 and change. Is that how much it costs for a kindergartner? Or an 8th grader? Or how about a high schooler? If you go to a private school, you can see the difference between a kindergartner, an 8th grader, and a high school tuition. The problem is, we're seeing our decrease in enrollment now at the high school. That's the high end. 58 in change versus 30 in the elementary schools. And the elementary schools had a 33% decrease in class size. That means you could put 33% more kids in those classes. But we didn't. How do we fix it? We got the director of personnel to make a tremendous judgment to fix it. How did he fix it? Simple. Let's reduce the class size rate from 21 to 25 or 19 to 23. Let's decrease it to 16. It's fixed. What's the most expensive thing you can do to teach in a classroom? Teach to an empty seat. That's the most expensive thing you can do, and you get nothing for it. Okay. Now going to the Board of Selectmen. The first budget that our town manager gave us was over 4%. We said, okay, she's new, give her a break. Second one is even higher. It's time to give her another break. The Board of Finance spent 3 hours trying to fudge that budget so the public would be able to see that it wasn't so high. Took money from here, took money from there. These are all taxpayer money. The general fund is our money. These places where they have money in various spots, they take it out and smooth over the rate. So these budgets are really more higher than we're talking about. We're talking about money, millions of dollars coming out of these funds, $600,000 to do road repair, $1 million for health insurance or whatever. You can see the public doesn't understand this stuff. It's tough. It's tough for me to figure it out when I spend hours going through it. So, what can we do? We can do nothing. We have elected officials who basically, when you look at the Board of Education, they put the pupils first. I do too. I think we should spend as much as we possibly can afford on education. It's the greatest money you can spend. But when you spend it and it doesn't produce the benefits from a cost-effective point of view, then who's getting cheated? The taxpayers. They're paying for something that's over and above which is necessary. How many assistant superintendents of school do you need? Director of personnel was an assistant superintendent of schools. That person moved on to special education. Oh, that position now is assistant superintendent of schools. Director of curriculum, that's now assistant director. That's only for pay purposes. It's nothing to do with the job description. But who knows about this stuff? The Board of Education, it's not elected. Secretary of State doesn't believe it's proper what they're doing. And they're going to have to change it. You can't go to the polls and say, 4 people running, vote for any 2 and all 4 elected. How do you change the Board of Education? They spent $71 million of our money. Not cost effective. We once were a town that had a per capita spending rate for our pupils of 129 out of 169 towns. Now we're 93. Now we're 93. Not necessary. We made bad decisions. How we funded all-day kindergarten, how we did the 8th grade at the high school, and now the Henry James project. It's a disaster. It's a $24 million disaster. So, Rick, so my conclusions are, yes. My recommendations are, I think we got a problem. Anybody who looks at this graph, it has to do with our census in town. Just look at the graph, and you tell me if an 8th grader couldn't do better. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? I'm going to sit back down in a minute, but hearing none, would ask the Board of Finance if we feel we've had given adequate opportunity and whether we should close the public hearing. And if so, I need a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
All right? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, so I'm going to sit down, and then we're going to go through where we are and any other questions we have, and answer the question of what we do next, all right? All right, I guess I'd ask any of the board members if they had a particular thing that they wanted to say before. I have a couple of things I'd like to do when we get to the worksheets that Amy has put up and talked about. You want to start, Lisa?
So I have comments at a proposed motion.
Okay,
Are those okay?
those are all on the table.
First of all, I wanted to extend my thanks to Matt, Burke, Maria, Melissa, Amy, department heads, boards of selectmen, Board of Education, everyone who worked on this budget, members of the public who did come out. We really do appreciate your comments, and town staff. So thank you for everyone that you did, and of course SCTV. Mark, that's for you. I wanted to let folks know that I think people have done a great job, and also, Rob, I want to commend you on your leadership. I think you've done a great job. Really reached out, been very collaborative, and looked for solutions to meet the needs in an affordable manner for the residents of Simsbury, which is not easy to do in this budget cycle, so thank you. My support of this budget, however, should not be taken as an endorsement of the CIP or the 5-year plan for capital non-recurring expenditures presented in the budget books. Those drafts, as they are presented, do not come before us tonight for approval, so we're not going to be voting on them. But they do not meet Board of Finance guidelines, and the draft CNR small capital expenditure plan was presented with some mistaken assumptions that will need to be adjusted in future budgets, and which I think can be adjusted in future budgets. I've had good conversations with both Amy and Maria and appreciate their willingness to take a second look at that. That may mean delaying projects in out years, phasing finance, or prioritizing needs, which I know you can do, and it may require the Board of Finance to adjust some of our policies, so we'll look forward to some vigorous conversations on that going forward. I did want to make a point about affordability, which is always on our mind. Last year, some of our residents who have owned homes in the $250,000 to $450,000 range had a substantial tax increase in the $200 to $300 range. They're going to be looking at a $228 tax increase this year, so that's a $400 to $500 increase in taxes over 2 years, which is not insubstantial. I do want to recognize to members of the public that that is a hardship for some. But both boards worked very hard to try and deliver what they felt were essential services, and working with Rob and staff really came up with, I think, a very responsible budget. One of the things that did not make it into the budget that I would propose we make a motion to do, and I will make that motion, is to add $18,000 in the contingency line item of the town manager's expenditure budget to be used for the 350th celebration as recommended by the Board of Selectmen, so the Board of Selectmen will have approval of that. That was not in the budgets, as I understand they don't have a budget right now, but rather than coming back to our board later with a request to use reserves, to me, it's a little more transparent to put it in the budget, let folks know that it's there, and then if they don't need it, it would then go back to the general fund. So, and that is also the number that they had budgeted for the EDC, so it was consistent with their budgets. I did consult with Eric Wellman and Sean, ask them, sorry I didn't get to you, Mike, on that one, to see if that was something that would be amenable. So I'm not sure when you're taking motions.
Well, I want to be clear, you're suggesting that we add $18,000 to the 23,952?
Yes.
Okay, so that will change all of the numbers and we'll do that is the recommendation.
And I did let Amy and Maria know that, yeah.
All right, can we just see what else is on the table?
Absolutely.
And we can do those one at a time. Eric?
No, I echo what Lisa had said about everybody's efforts. Certainly, Maria and Amy, thank you. I am confident that there's going to be a more transparent budget going forward based on the last couple of meetings. I'm excited about that. I think everybody should be, and thank you for the sacrifices that certain departments had to make. That's pretty much all I have.
I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask that I think might be useful for the public as well. And I do have some comments and suggestions of things that I think we need to address, but I'll hold those until after you make your comments, because they may be duplicative. Well, I don't want to, steal your thunder.
All right.
I would ask that you address the issue of the union position that the gentleman talked about, and just tell us a little bit about what your reaction to that is, if you don't mind. So that's the first question.
Sure. Some of it would fall under strategy for collective bargaining.
I'm not asking you
what I can comfortably in open session. So typically, my experience when there's a planned reduction in force, I understand the union's position. They have an obligation to represent. If we were to receive a grievance, that is something that, again, would be expected. We do have a grievance process under the collective bargaining agreement with 3 steps. If ultimately we are unable to resolve something at that level, we would typically, the next process would be mediation, ultimately followed by arbitration. I will say in my experience and planned reduction in forces, I've never actually made it that far in the process. That usually there is, compromise in these situations. And we have consulted with Labor Council on this, and I do think we have a very strong economic argument given the fund, being in a deficit position for 8 out of 10 years.
So maybe I didn't state my question well, but can you just explain what the position is? And
Sure.
Again, not to ask you to violate confidences, but
Sure.
address, it's a full-time position?
It is a full-time recreation supervisor position.
And what was your thought about why it isn't needed?
Sure. So again, it's a full-time recreation supervisor position that was fully paid for by the Special Revenue Fund. The Special Revenue Fund, we were projecting approximately a $90,000 deficit.
Yeah.
So without some sort of a staffing reduction, there was really no way for us to close that gap. As it was, there is an increased contribution from the general fund to close the deficit that would have been even greater. So that staffing reduction was an effort to, again, bring the fund into balance. It's a special revenue fund. It should not be operating in a deficit position. So we felt that was a responsible decision to make from a financial standpoint. We are most likely going to be reassigning some of the rec supervisor's duties to another rec supervisor that we have in the existing classification. That individual had been performing some duties that can be performed by an admin assistant. So we will be shifting around some existing duties. There possibly may be some new or additional or different duties that may be performed by part-time employees. That piece we haven't really evolved since we've gotten to that point in the process. But again, that's the planned reduction is one full-time person in the Park and Recreation Department that's responsible for recreation programming.
I would just say I think we all know that budget has been under huge pressure.
Yes.
So I appreciate you looking at how it can be managed more cost effectively, and so I understand your need there. And I did want to ask Amy, this was to educate me, but I suspect I'm not the only one who's stumbling over this. When we went through the worksheet at the last meeting, I went away thinking that we were going to have a budget that said 1.96% increase in the mill rate, and it turned into a bigger number as a percentage increase. So, and I know there's an explanation, but I didn't fully understand it. So, since I didn't, maybe others didn't either. So, if you could just go through that again, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So we had the 1.96 when we added the $850,000 to pay for the health insurance fund as the transfer into the health insurance fund. Thank you. So when we did this, if you look at the 2.93, there's your 2.93. So we're going to take out this $850,000 to transfer it to the health insurance fund to be paid for by fund balance. So now at the same time, we also have to take out transfer.
So you're taking, the 850 came out of
I'm starting from
reserves.
scratch.
So that,
I'm pretending like you guys haven't even talked about it yet.
Okay.
And I'll show you. So we're going to take it out of here. So it's no longer a transfer to the health insurance fund, and it's no longer being paid for by reserves.
okay.
So you're still at your 2.93%. So what happened when we were playing with the spreadsheet, you all said you wanted to transfer the money to the health insurance fund and you wanted to use fund balance to do it. So when I started to play with the spreadsheet, I put in the revenue source of the $850,000 for the health insurance fund, and that's where you get your 1.96. But I never put in the transfer to the expenditure side, which Lisa caught when I was playing with the spreadsheet. I only put in the revenue. So when you only put in the revenue and no expenditure, you're providing mill rate relief. But now you can't transfer the $850,000 to the health insurance fund because there's no expenditure in the expenditure budget to do so. And this actually comes into play later on this evening as well.
Okay, I see.
So now we're going to transfer it to the health insurance fund. We're going to record the expense.
So
We have the revenue source, and now you're at the 2.93.
All right. I didn't get that you actually had put it in the budget and then not.
Yeah, it's easier to show you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Not that I'm happy to see the
No, I know.
bigger number by any stretch of the imagination.
Is that it?
Well,
No? Go ahead.
Do you, all right.
Well, no, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead?
All right, so a few things. I will say that historically, I've been kind of the person who's fairly tough on seeing increases in the budget. And so even when I thought it was just 2%, I spent a lot of time going through and looking for, all right, well, where did this increase come from? In educating myself more, it became apparent to me I needed to support what's been proposed here for the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed. When you break it down for the Board of Selectmen budget, which is the one that, looked like it went up the most, there were, basically 4 things that drove, 6 things that drove up the budget more than we would have liked. 4 of them, there really wasn't much control or any control that any of us had. Health insurance, we had to do something about that. There was no option there. Police step increases, those are negotiated, bargained, there's not much that you can do about that. The MS4 mandate about the drains, nothing we can do about that. And the previous underfunding of Medicare and Social Security, we have to fund that properly. So those are a big chunk of the increase. There just isn't much room for wiggling there. And then there were 2 items that were added that were discretionary, but they're both items that I personally, in spite of being fiscally conservative for years, I personally have advocated for, so I can't exactly vote against them. One is to put more money into the Simsbury Farms budget because we've underfunded it for years. And then we end up, paying for it at the end of the year out of reserves, and it's just not honest to budget less than is reality. And I'm a big advocate that, we have wonderful parks and services that a huge portion of the town population uses and enjoys and wants us to fund these things. I mean, that's Simsbury Farms is one of the jewels of the town. And so I think, we are obligated to keep it in a sound financial position. And the other is the finance position. Amy does a great job. I think she's going to have gray hair very soon if we don't give her some help, even though she's really too young for that. It's been a problem for years. I mean, we all know there, and even the auditors are saying, you don't have backups and stuff that you should have because there just isn't enough staff there. So, when I broke it down into those 6 items, there just isn't room. So there was not a lot of place I could go to find any changes. So, even though it's kind of a departure from my past, I am going to support this, even though it's higher. I think we will come up with ways to reduce the mill rate impact because I really don't want to see taxpayers paying a lot more, and I don't want us holding money that we shouldn't. I think we all want to make sure that taxpayers are kept within a reasonable budget. And there's, ways to do that don't necessarily come out of your 2 budgets. So I wanted to give that as background. One item that I did chat with Matt about in relation to the Board of Ed, and I'm going to ask the Board of Ed to help with this. There was an article in the news recently, in the national news and in the local news, talking about school safety. And obviously that's something we all absolutely want to keep our children safe. There have been horrific things that have happened in the country, and we don't want any of that to happen here. But we also want to, make prudent decisions, and what the article, and there's this research study that just came out, so of course nobody knew about it until Wednesday, that indicated that many of the things that intuitively make perfect sense to all of us to do, they're saying in this particular research report, and I haven't read other research reports, is saying that they're not effective. So I'd like to ask the Board of Ed, since we have built, $750,000 into the budget for you, it's, at this late date, I wouldn't expect us to, think you're going to have an instant reaction to it or ability to review that. But I'd like to just toss it back to you as responsible members of the Board of Ed and the leadership of the Education Department to look at that research before you spend the money and draw a determination amongst yourselves about the efficacy of what you would spend the money on. And if that research report is wrong, or you think there's other research that supports what you're doing, great. And if you think the research report is right, let's not spend it if it's really just a feel-good thing that, in fact, doesn't protect children. And, one of the points the article was making was that some of this stuff is worse than doing nothing because it gives people a false sense of security, and therefore they let their guard down, and that's worse than doing nothing. So I'm not an expert in this field. I haven't researched this. It's not my job. I know it is yours, and you will do that. I just wanted to highlight that to you and ask you to take a look at that stuff. There are some capital questions I want to address, but I'm going to wait until after.
We'll do that together.
Yeah,
All right.
I think you'll probably address that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yep.
Kevin?
I just want to make a comment. I mean, we live in a great town, right? There's a lot of great people that live in town. We're all trying to make this a better place for us. There's a lot of good things that take place in this town, and I just want to echo, I appreciate all the work that everybody does. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is out of our control, right? It's not necessarily an expense problem, it's a revenue problem. So every budget season, we're left with the same thing. We're trying to manage the expenses the best way we can. That's it.
Okay, so a couple comments and then a couple things I'm going to ask Amy to do for us. I try not to, respond to individual things said, but I think one of the things that we have to remember about our process is that when we have a tri-board meeting, it's in November or December, 3-4 months into the year. We have no idea what the grand list is going to do. We have no idea what inflation's going to do. We have no idea how our budget really will work out for this year. We do the best we can in that environment to give guidance. And then we go about the hard work of finding out what the realities around where we spend money and what the world is. And we work with the constituent parties to make sure that we do the appropriate thing. We are the gatekeeper for the money of the taxpayers. We feel we take that responsibility very, very seriously. And I'll share Dr. Rinaldi's comments that it is a shame that we don't have the taxpayer participation, the citizen participation. I find myself missing those town meetings at the auditorium at the high school. If anything else, it was the most entertaining night of the year. But, stand up and be counted. We've lost all of that, but I don't think we can put that genie back in the bottle. We have a process that is what it is. The voters will show up and they will vote. And that's the way we do business in this town, and that's the way it's going to have to be. All right. I do want to get back to capital, because a lot of what we've talked about here is about capital. And frankly, we are in the midst of a transition with a new capital policy, and we have names for things sometimes that are confusing. And it frustrates me even because we're spending... None of the discussion about none of it was about whether we needed the plow truck or not. It was where it shows up, on which page, and how long it takes us to recoup paying for it. So having said that, we're going to have a discussion about capital in just a minute. But I do want to go back. Show me again the 850 on the expense side. Can you do this for me, Amy? Because I had this till about 10 minutes ago.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No. And go all the way to the left, and so...
I'm just gonna hide these columns so that you could see all of it.
Okay.
All right, so here's your transfer to the health insurance fund, and here's your...
So does that make it a revenue item?
No,
or is
that makes it an expense.
It's an expense in which budget?
In the operating transfers budget. In the general fund. And then on here, this 850 is your revenue on how you're going to pay for it. And you're going to pay for it by fund balance. If this were not here, that zeroes out, and then your taxpayers are paying for it. So then this goes to 3.90.
Okay, so I'm not completely accepting that, but I'm going to ask us a question a different way. Why can't we just take unassigned fund balance and make it assigned fund balance like we did with the Hartford property in reverse?
You can?
I thought that's what we were doing. I thought that's what the proposal was last week. Does anybody else want to chime in
Does it
here?
affect?
Yeah, so
Bottom
if
line?
you're going to do that, then that gets rid of this. And then your mill rate is I'm sorry, no, I'm lying. Your mill rate is not 1.42. But you have to take out the expense, and so you're still at the 2.9.
No, now you put the 850 back in up on the top.
Then that's mill rate relief.
Right, exactly, which is what I thought we were doing. That's what I thought we were doing. Which is why we had that discussion this morning about this.
Right, so you take it out on the side.
But then there's no transfer to the health insurance fund.
Yes.
Straight out of reserves.
Comes out of the general fund and into the healthcare or the internal service fund. So now it's an assigned fund.
No, because now there's no expense for it. So now this line item for the health insurance fund says it's a zero transfer.
I think Lisa.
I don't know what that line means.
You have to pay for that transfer somehow. Either the taxpayers have to pay for it.
No,
or
it was on our balance sheet. It was in general fund, and now it's in a separate fund. We transferred it in. We transferred.
You can't transfer in the cash without having a revenue and expense.
Where's the? Say that
Well,
again.
if we hadn't, let's go back to, if we hadn't had to increase the amount of money, if we hadn't had to put money into the internal service fund, there wouldn't have been an expense.
Right.
So there's this expense, And so let's pretend that that expense never is in the operating budget because it's going to be paid for straight out of the revenue fund, out of the
Out of the fund
reserves.
balance. You can't do that, and the reason that you can't do that will actually be a later motion in tonight's agenda, which is what happened last year with the $1 million that you planned on transferring to the health insurance fund. That's exactly what happened. Sean didn't include it as a transfer, so it never became part of the budget.
Which is exactly what we intended. Please.
So there are two ways you can fund the internal service fund, and I think that's part of the confusion. It is confusing. We could, off budget cycle, say we're just going to use reserves and put it in, no mill rate impact, right? But you're still taking $850 out of the general fund reserves and putting it in the internal service fund, no mill rate impact. This is essentially the same thing. She's budgeting, instead of doing that mid-year, she's saying, let's just do it as part of the budget cycle. If we do it the other way, we need Board of Selectmen needs to recommend it, and then we approve it. That's the process. But during the budget, we have line item control, so we can just do it as part of the budget cycle. And if we do that, you show the transfer as part of the budget, and then you show the revenue. So it's essentially the same thing in terms of impact to the residents. It doesn't change the mill rate. Is that
That had no impact on the mill rate.
correct?
Right.
All it did was we are charging the taxpayers the $850 and we're putting it in the fund.
Well, if you want to do
Is that right?
Yes.
Is what I said right?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you wanted to do mill rate relief, you would have to do another expenditure.
All right, so let me stop for a minute and then go to the next point, which is, let's go back to the levy calc sheet.
Do you want to put back the 850?
Yeah, go back to where you were. You're 850. Yeah, put it there and not anywhere else. All right? All right. So now let's scroll down to where we end up on the fund balance as a percentage of our.
So this is at the 99.5
Okay.
collection rate.
All right. So this is one of the other things. This was the big. What's that?
Yeah, to the left is
This is the
98.
98.5% collection rate.
Yeah,
This is the
yeah. So this was the
99.5.
thing that bothered me last week, or last meeting, and Amy has helped by finding a mistake or correcting and doing it, presenting it in a way now that is consistent with the way we used to think about it, which is on the left is using a 98.5 rate. All right, so let's walk through this. I think this is education or helpful to understand where I'm at anyway. So can you scroll down a little bit? We'll roll all the, yeah, there we go. All right, so the audited June 30th, 18, we had $16,794,000 in fund balance. And that's because we collected 99.5%. All right, there's no assumption. That's why it's the same on the left and the right. All right. So the unassigned fund balance is 14,380. No.
It's 15.
Yep. No, you're right. Your unassigned is 14,380.
So when you drop down, why is it 15,880?
Because your motion at the last meeting, you unassigned.
Okay, fine. Got it. Okay. All right. So we moved
it's
that in.
1.5
So at the beginning of this fiscal year, the fund balance was 15,880, and we're projecting 98.5%. No, that's the collection rate. And given where we are, we expect to end up with an unassigned fund balance of $14,745,000, which is 15.14%. All right? But if in fact we actually collected 99.5%, another $811,000, we'll end the year June of 19,
Right,
3 months from now,
with almost 16%.
16%. All right? And then if you roll that forward, it seems to me another way to think about this is take that unassigned and go to the left, but she doesn't. She just rolls this all the way down, still at 98.5%. You'll see that we ended up at 13.71%, and that was the number that I thought just couldn't be true,
Got it.
given the things that we were doing. and it's understated by not just $800,000, but almost $1.6 million. Got it? All right. So,
Well, but the second row has not been, that's not a true statement yet, right? Because our unassigned isn't.
well, all right, so that's, we haven't earned it yet.
Right, exactly.
But the column on the left that came to the conclusion of 13.71 assumed we didn't earn it in either the current year or next year, and we were going to end the June 20, having under-earned from what we have historically earned by $1.6 million, understates the percentage considerably. Now, the way Sean did it, and again, this is just a different way to do it, was every year we would put the 800 would be 500,000. We would add $500,000. And then we would look at where we were going to be and make some adjustments. So, is it true to say that we're using 850 of fund balance here? If in fact we're running it through the P&L also?
Because that's where it comes from. You're correct, though. We have more funds than is on the spreadsheet
Yeah.
because of that, but it still has to come from somewhere. So it's coming from the general fund.
All right, so let's go back up and say, if what we really intended to do was give tax mill rate relief with the money that we're putting into the insurance trust fund, then we should change this back from 850 on the fund balance transfers line, and we'd be at 1.96. Is that right?
Well, you have to add another 850,
Yes.
yes, and then you'd be at 1.96, but now you're using 1.7 million in reserves.
I don't think so.
Yes, you are.
Why is it 1.7 in reserves?
Because you're paying for 850,000 from the general fund to the health insurance fund, you're using the reserves to pay for that, and then you're also using the reserves to pay for $850,000.
Oh, for the mill rate
in
relief. Got it. So you've added an extra expenditure from the reserves, is what I'm hearing.
I wish I felt better about this. All right, so my actual proposal before we got here tonight was to put 150,000 more in as pure mill rate relief. Can you do that? And that would give us take us from 3642 to 3742, 2.76% increase in the mill rate. So another way, when I tried to explain this, is the other thing we could do is we could simply increase the revenue assumption for the collection from 98.5 to 99.5.
Or 99.
Or 99. And we would be at the same place. So we're not taking money from anywhere. It's money that we have historically earned.
Yes.
It's an assumption in the model,
Correct.
upon which we will then go get the money from the taxpayers.
Correct.
And which, quite frankly, because we assume far less than, as a collection
Yeah.
rate than we actually have ever experienced.
Right.
We're, in my opinion, taxing people at
So
a higher amount than.
Far less?
No, we're taxing them more than we need to.
You're saying one
because-
percentage point is far less? We're basically underwriting far less. Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think there's very little wiggle room between 98.5 and 99.5.
It's $1 million.
Yeah.
I mean, $1 million, we kill for $18,000 here. $1 million is a lot of money.
Yeah. It's an
In the same
assumption.
breath, it's allowed us to build the reserves.
Yeah,
To be
so
able
now
to-
go
So you wanna
down,
do it every
let's
year.
finish, so go
So
down
you're saying a
now.
one-time,
Well, you can't really
No,
do
no.
it as a one-time.
No, no,
thing. Once
it-
you do it, you're.
One-time-
you're there.
No, you're not
Collection
obligated to do
increase?
it. You look at the balance, you look at all of the things as they move around, and you say, we want to give mill rate relief this year of $150,000. You're not obligated to do it again next year. You haven't built in an expense that has to be duplicated next year. This conversation of the cliff.
Well, you've built in a revenue source
It's
that,
tax them now or tax them later.
right.
And so you're saying go down to the bottom, one more. That's a 15.2 targeted reserve, unassigned reserve at the end of June 2020, which is every bit as much as where we started back at the end of June on our last audit, which was 1527. So the alternative is to go get that 150,000 from the taxpayers, and then we would end up at 1535.
So, question, did you look at just changing the, you did 150, did you look at going to 99 and 95, or you just want to do the 150?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
98.75.
I'm just a round number guy, and so the 1% increase in the mill rate seemed like,
And 150 got us down a quarter in taxes, 150,000?
to 2.75 from, or 2.7 something.
2.76, yeah, one even mill.
So, the median home went from 228 to 215. It's $1 a month. Not quite a latte at Starbucks.
But we just saw Stop and Shop, and some of the numbers that they were fighting over, what some people would not consider that large,
Right.
but it was significant to
Right.
them.
So, if we do this, what motions do we have to make to?
Alright, I just want to clarify. So the way we have it now, this $150,000 is coming out of fund balance. Do you want it to come out of fund balance, or do you want to reduce the collection rate
Right.
and have it not be even considered as part of fund balance?
I
It's
don't
6 to
care.
1, but
I
it's a-
want to set the mill rate at 37.42.
Okay,
I would do it as changing the collection rate.
Sure.
okay.
So what would the collection rate be for that?
She has to use the solve feature on the Excel.
But, so a million,
You have to take the 6-week Excel course.
Which I have not done.
Or just
I
gonna
would
do
rather
it
make
the easy
assumption
way?
changes outside of voting on a.
Fund balance transfer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fair enough. I'm
You don't
okay
make
with
assumption changes at the investment committee, basically.
Alright, hold on.
What- I'm sorry, what is it you're
I'm saying you
proposing?
don't make last minute assumption changes. You either just eat it or at the expense of, we're just making underwriting assumptions right now at the
Right.
last minute. I don't propose.
Well, we were going to,
some of us have thought about this.
Well, here, it's
for a
gonna
long
show,
time.
well, in a
Changing
month.
that assumption.
In a month,
It will-
if the referendums pass, we will set this mill rate.
yeah.
And do we put an indicative mill rate into the information
No.
that goes to the town?
Nope.
No.
No.
Oh, for the budget,
For the
mailer?
referendum?
For the budget mailer, that information is going to be shared by the estimated impact. It's not on the official budget.
It's not on the
Right, but it's
thing you
not on
vote
the
on.
ballot that people will vote on, correct?
Okay, so now all we've done is exactly what we did last meeting, except we've increased the assumption of the collection rate from 98.5 to what?
Oh, I don't know what it is, hold
Oh.
on. I just took out the 150.
Okay,
Make it easy.
98.75,
Yeah, something like that.
barely. Probably not even.
And
All right.
you prefer to take it out of reserves? Is that what you were saying?
I'd just rather, well,
I'd rather
Yeah.
take it out of reserves.
yeah, exactly.
Well, so here's
And
my
we're gonna
perspective
end,
on
we're gonna
that.
end up with more. We're gonna
If you
end up
take it out of
collecting more.
reserves this year, then you'll need to make that decision to do it or not do it again next year. And if you decide not to do it, you will have a reduction in, not revenue, but, I mean, it's like an accounting sense of revenue.
Right, so you're just saying like, don't change the collection rate because then we're gonna have to look at the collection rate every single year.
No, I'm saying change the collection
That's
rate, because you
right,
can
but-
make
but
that
you'll have it-
decision once, and
Oh,
then you
so you
just
wanna be
leave
able to
that
make that
collection
decision
rate
every year.
alone. If you take it out of reserves, You'll have to make
All
a
right, so,
vote to take
so
it
if
out
that's
of
the way you
reserves
want to go.
every time.
Yeah, so if you do that, then you have to go to 99 from 98 and a half. So if we
Or,
did,
yeah.
This
or-
is-
no, I mean, you can't change it.
This isn't the.
We're solving,
98.
we're solving for a
Saying how
tax
long we've
rate,
been
but if
doing
you
it,
want to do it that way,
98.5.
you have to say,
I would take it out of fund balance.
Me too.
if you did it now, it's going to lower the taxes more if you go to 99.
You can do it in smaller increments if you want, doesn't have to be a whole 0.5%.
So I'm not
Collection
comfortable
rate.
changing the assumption rate permanently. So I know that's
Yeah, I think that is,
position. Yeah.
see, I think it's better if we say, we have looked at all of these expenses and all of these revenue items, and we believe that we only need to charge the taxes of X for this year, so that we're solving for multiple things here. We want to have a balanced budget. We want everybody to work hard on their expense budget, and we're solving for a target fund balance at the end of the fiscal year in the 15-something range.
Yeah, I agree. I would rather set a target,
And acceptable.
Yeah, an acceptable target range of fund balance to overall budget.
So that for this fiscal year, then, we're saying we will give,
What is the target range?
14, and I mean, that's a whole discussion,
Well,
but I would say
in
14 to
policy-
15.
In policy, right,
It's 10 to 12,
yeah,
10 to 12, right.
and we have not changed that policy. I think all of us would say, well, probably it needs to be a little bit more than
Yeah.
that, but is it 15%? Is it
I
14?
said 14 to 15, somewhere
So-
in there.
so if
When I
it's-
see 13s, I start getting nervous.
Yeah,
but
if
just
it's
personal.
even 14 and a half, you can take $1 million out of total unassigned, and you're still,
put the mill
That's
rate
where
in
you
at
wanna be.
36.42. What's the mill rate at 36.42?
Well,
Can you do that without blowing the whole thing up?
$36.42, you need to decrease $2.5 million.
ooh,
What's that?
You need to decrease the budget $2.5 million if you want to be at $36.42, which is your
or
current mill
increase the
rate.
revenue.
Or you could use 2.56 million of the fund balance
Yep.
but just show, so this would be the extreme of doing that. What would the fund balance be at the end of 2020, June 20?
12.5.
Cool.
12.8 days.
And then you would have the cliff that,
Yeah,
If we had a 2% increase in our tax mill rate this year, what would
yeah,
that
you
look
have to
like?
scroll back up, because you were at 0, so.
You want to see a 2% increase in the mill rate?
Yeah,
Yeah.
You need to decrease the budget $831,000.
Or use $800,000 from.
Of reserves.
Of reserves. You keep saying what you're saying, I'll keep saying what I'm saying. And then our fund balance at the end of the period would be,
831.
close to 50, it's been 14 something percent.
14.5%.
I'm okay with that.
what is the collection assumption rate you're using on this?
It's still 98.5. I didn't change anything.
98 and a half, right?
So I,
No, it's not, it's 99 and a half.
Well,
On the
here
right
it's
side, it's
99.5,
99.
but for,
Well, that's sort of the reality of what you'll get,
Right.
as opposed to,
Right.
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
right.
so I'm just concerned that this year we may not have the same collection rate that we've had in the past, with the percentage of people who are not getting refunds this year.
So let's say we're half wrong, all right? Let's say
Okay.
it's 99, We would be between 13.7 and 14.53. I actually think the 13.7 would be low. I think
But you'll still be in the 14% range.
I think so.
But we're forecasted to have an increase, right? We're forecasted to have an actual increase
Yeah, so
because of the development.
the fiscal year 19, both of those, there will be positive fund balance increase from operations in the year. True? Not true? Expected? You're not going to take it yet?
Well,
Not known.
Claim that yet.
so,
Well,
if I could just quickly, so, I mean, we do have very good data from historical collection rates that 99.5 is a realistic sort of number of what we can reasonably expect. And I think that we may see that number continue to be stable or perhaps even increase. You may recall that we did implement a tax sale policy this year, and just with that being in place, we've seen our collection rate increase. So again, that 99.5 is sort of based on historical data prior to the tax sale policy being implemented.
The what
The
policy?
tax sale policy being
Sale,
implemented?
tax sale. Okay.
Correct, right, so that's just a piece of information that I think would be helpful to share. The other piece in terms of whether or not to adjust the assumption rate versus potentially using money out of reserves, this is a question that we have asked a couple of different bond consultants recently in terms of, what's looked at, more favorably. And they did say that it can be a red flag for rating agencies to see continued use of fund balance to essentially pay for operating expenses or to create mill rate relief. So in that regard, maybe perhaps are there benefits to, if you do want to, say, increase the assumption rate versus using a planned use of reserves for mill rate relief. From a rating perspective, that there's probably some benefit to increasing the assumption rate as opposed to the use of reserves.
And we got some additional revenue from Deepwater Wind that we had not budgeted.
That's
So that
correct.
will, do we have an end of year projection on revenues from building permits yet, Amy or Maria?
We do have in the budget status report for you.
Yes,
We did
but-
receive the Deepwater Wind permitting fees. It was a little over $600,000. We're already about $280,000.
But we
over
haven't hit our
projected.
stride in terms
Right.
of the building. So
Exactly.
where do we think it's going to be? Because that may then take care of a lot of the,
For current year, right?
Yes.
So we don't have that number yet, but we are performing better in that account. And then again, because of the tax sale policy, you'll see that our collection rate, we've essentially already hit almost budget for that particular number.
And I had a question when I was looking through all of the materials that you sent. There were a number of different pages where Amy was pointing out that we're favorable to what was budgeted for the current year. Are all of those favorable numbers already in that
Yes.
reserve number? Okay. And then also,
Not the 600,000 that she was referring to, which is actually not in those numbers, but it is noted in the budget status report.
but it's not reflected in.
Right.
So that will actually help us bump back up.
Right, yes.
And there are a number of, you've got the list of capital items or bonded items that have been open for some years. And in some cases, the project is even listed as completed, but there's still a fund balance in that. And if you add up, all of those projects that are years old and presumably completed, or some of them even documented as completed, shouldn't those balances be put, shouldn't we close those and put those into reserves as well?
So that's actually a discussion, it's a discussion for later on, and then it's also a discussion for year end. So a lot of those projects that say completed, I'm hesitant to put in as a part of capital transfers to close them out right now, because there's still bills coming in for those projects. So we're
Some of them are from 2010.
No, I know. Some of them are truly completed and done, but some of them still have bills coming in. So at the end of the year, I'll give you your capital transfers, and we'll close out all of those completed projects. And you have two options. And you can put it into the capital reserve that we've been talking about, or you can put it into general fund.
Okay. So there will be a chunk of money. Do you have any guess as to how much that might be? It's like $500,000?
Offhand, conservatively, I'd say about right now, I don't even want to say. I would say 300,000, but however, there's part of that that's bond funded that has to go back into the general fund, and then there's part of that that relates to a steep grant where, because we didn't spend all of that money, the state or federal gets it back. So, I mean, there is money, but
So
what's actual
I'm
general
still,
fund
it
has to
helps.
look.
I'm comfortable leaving it at 98.5 and revisiting it in, you know, as a policy to see what we want the fund balance to be at. I also think it's also a good resource for future boards to have some ability if unexpected things pop up. I also think that you know, we still don't know what the full governor's budget is going to be like. We don't know if we're going to have to pay that 36 or 37% for the teacher's pension. So I'm comfortable at 98.5.
All right, so-
As am I.
Huh?
I concur with that.
Could we just see what a 99 assumption rate looks like?
Well, that's that right-hand column.
That's
Well, it's
99.5.
99.5.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was 99.5.
That still has the 831,000 though. I'll take that out.
So what is the mill rate then on that? Why didn't it change the mill rate?
Well, hold on.
Not totally interactive.
83. I just don't want to mess up myself.
Okay.
Are you comfortable with the way that the 850 is being accounted for?
483, 485.
I just,
That makes my head hurt.
Yes. All right, so,
Wait, hold on, I'm not done.
okay.
It's a process.
So unfortunately, Brooke's not here. The increase, the teacher's retirement.
All right, good.
I think this year it was going to be like $300,000. Next year it was going to be
600.
No, 5 and then 900 the third year.
900 the third year.
600, yeah, 5 to
Right.
600. I did hear from John Hampton that he didn't think that that was going to go forward, but that we should still plan on similar dollar amounts because the numbers are what they are. If
Right.
it's not teacher pension, it's going to be
We still have
Right.
that $300,000
contingency.
contingency,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, that might be one thing that you could eliminate.
Right.
Because we do have a healthy reserve if you want to take, I mean, I'm hesitant to do that because we always use the governor's budget.
I think it's good
Talk out
budgeting,
both sides of
actually.
my mouth, I don't want to do that. I want to leave that in.
Me too.
So what was the mill rate at 99?
It's still the same, it's just your contribution to fund balance changes.
Well,
We
if
didn't
we
use-
increase the collection rate, we don't need to collect as much taxes, right? I mean, that should impact the mill rate.
No. She just changed the collection rate to see where the fund balance would be.
Right.
Oh, I wanted to see what it does to the mill rate. If
Right.
you're collecting more, what does that do to the mill rate?
And
Derek is
what are you
fund balance,
changing, what are you changing the collection rate to?
99.
99, just going up half. As a
Whoa.
Never mind, just kidding. Making miracles over here.
So then we're at a 245 increase?
Yes.
So that's, I mean, that's kind of the compromise position.
It
You know,
is,
I can understand the hesitancy of not making a major change, especially at this juncture, at this meeting. But it does get us to a,
I think if you did that, then you were locked into that for some
That's the
number of
concern.
foreseeable
Right.
years.
I
I
don't
think
think
you're
you're
locked
not.
in one way or the other. I mean, whether you take it out of reserves or you change the collection rate, you've now established a revenue stream towards that's going to be hard
This
to
is
wean
just
yourself
This
off
is
of.
just making us feel comfortable by changing it from 98.5 to 99.
yes.
I don't think that this is any precedent being set. I would, if we decide to do this, and I would only do it because I'm extremely bond rating sensitive and how Moody's or the rating agencies look at how we have reserves, and if it means moving the percentage as opposed to a range or a percentage is 14 to 15, that's what I would want to do, because I want to keep, given what we bond, I want that cost, that debt cost to be as low as possible. So I would be okay moving it this year, just simply based on that, and then reverting back to the 98.5. And to Kevin's point, if we have to use it as a tool in the future, that's fine, but I would not make this precedent set that this is what we do going forward full stop.
So I had asked Amy, because I know you'd raised this before, to do a little math, which she did and gave me and I failed to bring. But I asked her to look at, okay, if we went down one bond rating, because I know that's your concern, if we went from AAA to AA plus, what is the cost impact on our typical bond issuance over a period of time? And you did that, and I don't have the number with me, and do you remember what it was small? I mean, it was relatively small impact.
Yeah, so we used the $8.6 million that we're going to bond in this current fiscal year as an example. And it was, given the current spread, it was like $100,000 more. However, the current spread is not always going to be the spread in the future. So it could be shorter, it could be longer, it could be more money.
I mean, it changes the interest rate by like 0.1%. I mean, it's a pretty small impact. It's not like you go from a 2% to a 3%.
Yeah, I guess I would just question, because I know more recently the rating agencies have not just looked at Simsbury's rating, but in the context of the fiscal situation at the state as well, and there could be more volatility in that based on where our state is and given some of the stats we heard today.
But they also look at the fact that Simsbury gets very little state money. So even if the state goes down the tubes.
You would get a gold star.
Yeah, I mean, they look at a lot of things. They look at our reserves, they look at our tax base, the wealth of the town, how much debt we have, which compared to anyone else is fabulous. There's a lot of factors they look at.
I'm just saying this has been more recent that they looked at the health of our state.
Yes, they have, but again, for us, it's a fairly minimal
I agree with that, but
impact.
I'm not willing to change the priority of the Board of Finance. I think we should strive to keep the AAA, and that's a priority.
Well, but as, we've talked about, that's more of a point of pride than of significant fiscal impact. I mean, I don't disagree. I would like to keep it as well, but I don't want that to be such a driving factor that it clouds our thinking.
I think we're very late in the economic cycle as well, so I'd be cautious to start pushing the upper limits of our assumptions.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try to bring this back to what we have to accomplish tonight, all right?
Complicated stuff.
I don't think we should kick this can down the road, because we really will set the mill rate after the referendum. That's the day we do that. And I think we will do that. We'll have this same discussion one more time. And whether it takes the form of a higher assumption of the collection rate or a one-time use of fund balance for mill rate relief, or what was the other? Changing the collection rate really only impacts what our projected fund balance is, right? That's the only impact.
No, it saves about $30.
Right.
What?
Saves about $30 a year, so about $2.50 a month for residents.
Yeah, so if you had it at 98.5, there's your mill rate, and now you have your collection rate at 99.
Let me say it again. We're going to set the mill rate. We set the mill rate. The formula doesn't set the mill rate. We set the mill rate. And that will give us a revenue,
Yes.
and we'll have approved expense budgets.
Yes.
All right? And so if we set the mill rate at 37.31, we can then estimate what the fund balance will be by adjusting the collection rate. Because the real revenue rate up at the top, go all the way up, Amy. The revenue from taxes, where is that? Oh, it's not on there.
It's right here.
Okay. That's 100% of the mill rate times the grand list, correct?
No, that's what the
Hold on.
98.5 is.
Yes, this is 100%. And then this.
Oh, up there it is, okay,
Right,
And then this takes it by the collection rate.
right.
right,
Yep.
yeah. So we have a balanced budget. We have expenses and revenue. And all we're doing down below the line is trying to forecast what the fund balance will be. And in the past, we've hedged that bet a little bit by saying we're only going to get 98.5 cents out of a dollar. And if we change that assumption, we're changing that forecast, but only as it relates. It doesn't change anything above the line.
Right.
We're still going to bill
Right,
the full 100% of the taxes. We're still going to spend 100% of the expenditures, and we have a balanced budget. And then stuff happens during the year where we're over budget on expenditures or under budget on expenditures, or revenue comes in higher or lower. We collect more, we collect less. Those things happen during the year, and then we stop and we look and see how we did, and then we go forward each year. And the comment about, I don't like the slush fund word, but is that we have built in a cushion into this by the way we analyze that as we project. And the question is that the right thing to do as the percentage of our reserves have grown relatively steadily over the last 4 or 5 years. I think if you went back to when I first came on the board, we were in the 11 to 12% range. So we're building, and all I'm saying is that maybe this is the year we can just keep it flat
right.
and not
Build it.
increase, not set the mill rate at a point where it will continue to go up if those assumptions pan out as they have in each of the previous years.
So I would just add, if you could go to the grand list forecast, we're in good shape for the next 2 years. If you look at the 142 and 186, and then the grand list goes down. So you can do that. And Maria, just to confirm, you think that the rating agency would look at it more favorable to adjust the mill rate assumption rather than you doing a transfer. And if we did do the
Tax
transfer,
collection, right.
yeah,
Tax
at the tax
collection,
collection,
right.
right? If we did do the transfer thing, it would require a vote by the Board of Selectmen. They have to recommend all transfers off budget cycle,
Off budget cycle.
right? Unless we did it as part of the budget, but then you'd have to do a revenue and show the transfer, okay.
All right, so I do think before we go tonight and recommend, vote on whether we recommend these budgets, we have some consensus of our board as to where that number should end up on the mill rate. And we've gone all over the map. We started with a 3749, 2.93% increase, 107 mill rate increase. And that leaves us with a projected fund balance of the 15.35. Yes. Yeah. 15.35%.
At 99.5.
So it just,
Oh, no, is it at 99 or not?
99.5.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm comfortable with those numbers for sure.
Yeah.
And especially with the grand list growth coming, and Maria, it's your opinion that if we needed to, we could adjust it back to 98.5. There would be no problem with the rating agencies in doing the alternating if we needed to.
I don't sense that the assumption rate is the issue.
Okay.
It would be the consistent use of fund balance to essentially fund operating budget
Right.
expenses or to provide essentially mill rate relief. So that's a consistent, they said, pattern of that behavior is where it starts to be a red flag.
Which is why I want a budget for the 350. I don't want to forget about the 18,000
No, we won't, we
addition.
won't. Well, that'll blow the whole thing up. At 18,000, it's gonna be, we'll never go home tonight. There's a hockey game on, by the way. All right. I'm working.
in that?
We would.
So you do need some direction.
I think if
Do that.
this is the direction, we can include this in the budget.
All right, I'm going to take a time out here and ask for a motion relative to your $18,000, so that before we go too far, it's going to really blow
Okay,
this
so
up.
I move that we add 18,000 to the contingency line item of the town manager's expenditure budget to be used for the 350th celebration as recommended by the Board of Selectmen.
Do I have a second? I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 So we have 3. It passes. All right?
Yep.
Again, there was information that Amy provided and.
So there was a budget that we didn't see?
There wasn't a budget.
Oh, okay.
There was not a budget. But there is now, it is now an official town committee.
Right.
It has some form of governance, and
So was everybody on the board here provided with that information?
this afternoon, it's in the packet.
It's, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Does that change your vote?
No, but there's no budget.
The information about the
I just
town,
wanna
about
make sure
the formal town committee,
So this came up
That's something that just happened last night.
Right, yeah.
last night, okay.
was it in the packet?
It was in their packet.
Right, it was in the Board of Selectmen packet, it just happened last
How
night.
did, I found out about it today?
We spoke about it
Yes.
today.
I apologize. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Derek. No,
So-
I
so-
read something today about it.
And with it becoming an official town committee, the committee will now be subject to all of our
Yeah.
purchasing policies.
So that was,
and
yes, that was an unfair vote, because I thought everybody had the same level of information.
Yeah, I didn't actually, you didn't take the vote on the opposed, but I opposed.
All right. Nonetheless, it passes 3-2. Did you vote
Yep.
no or
I'm a no.
abstain? Okay, all right.
And it is contingent upon Board of Selectmen approval, so if they don't use it for the 350th, they would then revert back to the general fund. So it's, in other words, it's kind of a reserve there for that, because they don't have a budget.
Right. there's no
All right, so
budget.
before we,
18 is,
before we,
what does the 18 mean?
So yeah, there's.
Yeah, so,
You're saying
yeah,
it's
so-
such
no,
a
no, that's
small
where we're going
amount
next.
that it should
All right.
cover.
Yes.
Okay.
all right. Let's talk about where we are on the capital, and the
I didn't see it.
categories, and, do we have a slide for this? What do we have?
No.
Nothing?
I was
Okay.
going to walk you through it during the budget status report.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I was going to walk you through the categories and the capital during the budget status report.
Okay.
Since it's all
Can we
laid out.
do that now?
Sure.
All right.
All right. So if you go in your packet, and then in the budget status report, you have your typical schedule of expenditures compared with appropriations.
How far back is this?
Yeah.
This is
It's
like
about-
8,000 pages here.
It's about midway, a little bit more than midway.
Can you show me what it looks like on your?
Yeah.
So it's Board of Finance agenda item submission budget status report. It's about this far into the packet.
Okay.
Exactly. Hold on, there's something else that Don't look at it yet.
This is way too much paper for my little printer.
All right.
You get to fill in the blanks? You get to fill in the blanks?
That's the page we should be on.
All right, so in the policy, you'll remember that we broke it out between 3 different funds. We broke it out between the capital projects fund, the CNR fund, and the capital reserve fund. So your capital project fund is this sheet that you just found a little bit more than halfway through, and lists out all of your major capital projects that are in total in excess of $250,000 per project. That's what encompasses your capital projects fund.
All right, so there's a capital project fund.
Yep.
All right.
All right. So now if you move forward, the next page is capital project fund, but then the next page after that is your capital non-recurring fund. So this fund,
I'm on the wrong page,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, hold on.
I thought, I have something that says budget status report, but
No.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, we're not
Budget status
finding it.
report, yeah.
oh, there it is. This is your capital projects fund.
oh, that's
There we
the
go.
list that has all these
All the
balances
projects.
that are not in reserves yet.
I think that's the same.
Lisa?
Yes, we're sure.
Is that-
Okay, all right.
Okay. All right, so you guys are all in your capital projects fund.
Yeah.
So that fund is all of your individual
Major
projects
stuff.
that are in total over $250,000,
Yep,
okay? Make sense?
yep.
Yeah.
All right, move on to, at the next page, with the page after, it has the title of capital non-recurring fund. Yep, that's it.
Oh, I had 2 pages. That was 2 pages of that?
Yep, you want this one now?
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
all right.
So now your capital non-recurring fund is every project that's under $250,000, but over $10,000. That makes it capital. You'll see all of the fiscal year 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 CNR projects. These were all the capital non-recurring projects that were funded in past budgets.
What happened to fiscal year 14?
So you're only supposed to have 5 years, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Fiscal year 13 is only on there because there's a grant that's still open for that.
Oh, okay.
So fiscal year 14 fell off because the 5 years has been paid. The CNR assessor fund is the fund that we use to pay for the reval. And then your CNR reserve is that 1.9 million that we put aside for the pre-funding of the 5-year payback. So
Yeah.
there's essentially 3 things in your CNR fund. Your CNR projects that you approved, the CNR fund for the reval that saves up for the reval in 2022, I think it is, and then your reserve fund that makes the balance stable. And so the only distinction between this fund and your capital projects fund is that this is all your
Smaller
projects
items.
under 250,000.
Yep.
So now I also put, I just handed out one other thing for you. Oh, yeah.
Capital reserve fund.
Yeah. So this is the third fund that's mentioned in the policy, and this is your capital reserve fund. So this is something that, when I came on board, I saw it in the general ledger, but none of you seem to know about it.
It didn't really exist.
So when we closed out our capital projects at the end of last fiscal year, we had $15,000 in overall savings that we put into this capital CNR fund. So this is the fund that you would see that $50,000 per your capital policy to hold for emergencies. We didn't fund it this year due to the budget constraints, but there is $15,000 in it right now. So one other thing, when we were talking about the last budget discussion that we had at the public hearing, somebody had mentioned moving like $650,000 into a reserve. So this is where that would go. And part of the concern with creating this reserve is that, staff and departments can go in and use this money as they wish. So this $15,000 is not a reserve to be used at management's discretion. It is a reserve to be used at Board of Finance's discretion. So every penny that comes in and out of here has to go through all of you. And then this is where I can probably 98% say that when we close out this year's capital projects, if there are funds that have excess cash, this is probably where management would make the recommendation to put the money.
I would agree with that.
So those are the
And
3 funds.
Part of what we
in your-
talked about last time too was that this fund, when you look forward on the graph, the infamous bar graph, and we've got problems in future years, that you want to have some reserves to
Exactly.
kind of make up for some of the
Exactly.
shortfall there.
So those are the three funds listed in the policy, and now you can see the three funds spelled out in the report.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Did you want
Yeah.
to touch on the rest of this?
Yep, so I had also prepared some comments about all of the capital stuff, so those three funds. I think one thing that's not clear in our policy, and certainly not in my mind, is we always talk about the 6.7% cap. What does that apply to? Because we've got these three funds and also some cash, when it's underneath that. So, I think we need to have a little bit of a policy discussion amongst ourselves about what are we considering to be underneath that cap. And I would suggest that the cap applies to bonded debt service plus any cash that we spend that actually drives up the mill rate, but not to money that gets spent out of the capital reserve fund if it's been pre-funded, because it doesn't affect the taxpayer.
So just to clarify, everything that's within that target line of 6.7% or 7% is all of your capital projects, and your CNR above the $216,250, that's part of the 5-year payback. So you basically have $416,250 that's not included as part of the 6.7 or 7%. That's already taken care of with the 5-year payback. But anything above that is included as part of that line. So those are the two items.
Right. So our current, then, the way that we're looking at this, I just want to make sure everybody is in agreement with that and understands it, that we're just talking about those items and not the capital reserve fund being under the 6.7. Yeah, and that's how I would like it to be as well. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Everything else we kind of already talked about. I guess the only other question was, do we want to, we had some discussion, the 650,000, not that we really have the money to do that right now, but do we want to put some money into, but we'd have to take it out of the general reserves, general fund to do it, and I don't think we want to do that at this point.
Yeah.
And there will be capital money available at your end.
So when we get to that point, I think that's a good recommendation, that's where the money should come from.
Yeah, I would just say that it's not all or nothing, that you make the recommendation that the amount goes into just this capital reserve, but that we could allocate a portion of it to this reserve, just for everybody's edification.
Yeah, we can make that
If it's like, if all of a sudden this grows to, let's call it $1 million or $2 million bucks.
So I would like to also suggest that maybe, I feel like we don't give the capital projects the same level of review and time and attention that we should. That we try to take those recommendations off the cycle of the operating budgets if we can. Maybe start that project in January and have both and there's nobody here from the Board of Ed because to say that that's possible.
No money for that.
Huh?
No money for that.
Yeah. Fine. But to separate it from this process, because that way we can, is there any real reason? I know boards get approved and elected, and then we're sort of on that annual, biannual set, but it does seem like an awful lot, that if we could look at the projects, have the detail that we talked about, that we had seen before, and then together talk about how they will fit over the timeline of when they can be done, and have a discussion about it, which we didn't really do. Now, I know it's really the purview of each of the two boards to prioritize, but I think we should be part of that dialogue as we create our long-term chart and figure out when we're going to bond and how we bond. This is really a big part of our job.
And to have some clear sense of what are the criteria used for making those choices. There's stuff on that 5-6 year CIP plan that because it just marches forward, everybody just goes along with it. But when you start to look at it, it's like, well, really, does that rise to the same level of urgency as some other project? Maybe something else should come sooner, and some of these nice to do projects just, either got to get taken off or pushed back
Certainly
For several years.
for the larger projects, we should have that kind of conversation, really.
And moving them, delaying them for a year will actually get a few of those projects, I think 2 or 3. If you just delay them for a year, you will have a CIP plan that is actually compliant. It's not that hard to
With the
get it.
6.7.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can do that, but you're right, I think we would all benefit from that, and I like Linda's suggestion of having criteria. I know I've talked about that with Eric, and so I think,
Mike?
There is a requirement, or has been in the past, where town projects that affect public property have to go through the planning commission in order to be part of the approval process. And I believe that is still, I'm not sure it's in our charter per se.
Yes.
But that,
Only town and not Board of Ed, or you mean both?
well, it's all town property.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that has to be factored in and ultimately approved there as part of the series of steps. That's my only point. But I think your suggestion is a really good one.
And a charter does set deadlines, so we would ask you, can you work with that proposal?
Yeah, I think, give us some time to think about it. The Board of Selectmen, does go through a pretty extensive budget review process with the budget workshop. Capital is a dedicated, part of that process, and we go in depth about each of the CNR projects, each of the capital projects. And so perhaps there's a way to, bring the two groups together for those discussions, because the Board of Selectmen is having that discussion basically from the time I'm releasing my budget at the end of February through their budget adoption in middle of March. And that's where they're kind of getting into capital in depth, and perhaps there's an opportunity to hold joint meetings or joint discussions on capital. They've also had some, presentations on some of the proposed projects in out years, such as the radio system, the sidewalk infrastructure, and perhaps, again, we can think about how we do that moving forward. Maybe it's giving you all a heads up, hey, there's going to be a lengthy, presentation and discussion on our sidewalk assessment study. Please come to the Board of Selectmen meeting if you can attend. So let me just sort of think through that and how we can maybe, we can work with Rob and you all to kind of come up with a plan, and maybe sort of, as opposed to duplicating the efforts, maybe how we can bring the two boards together on capital items and capital discussion.
Yeah, maybe it should be a tri-board kind of discussion.
But try to move it away from the time when
Right.
we're presenting the
Do it in the
operating
fall.
budgets, if that's possible.
Yeah,
And we have,
because we know what's on the plan. I mean, we could do it in September. It doesn't need to be in,
Just food for thought. I mean, we do have a facilities study that's going on that, I think we can expect by third quarter, maybe fourth quarter, that there could be some recommendations on additional capital that we're going to need to spend. So just in terms of, again, prioritizing the spend.
public safety issues ought to
And public,
come first. And
public
We
property.
just need to take a look at the charter requirements and timeframe.
please, that's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah, but
Let's see if we
definitely take a look at
see if
all
we
of
can't
that,
figure
see
out
if
a
we can
different timeframe to do
But
that.
Rob, we could also do like a separate discussion in the tri-board too, because some of the things, we can just give you numbers of how to move stuff out to make it compliant. We could do some of that, and then you guys can do the specifics later. Maybe we could give more guidance.
Well, I'd like it to be one concentrated effort where decisions are made
Okay.
rather than duplicating, doing it twice if we can. And we can always deal with exceptions later. All right, we need to keep moving here. We still have a long way to go. And where we find ourselves now is recommending these operating budgets to the town voters for referendum. So we have resolutions to do that.
We do, but if we could take a quick break, because those have to be updated based on the changes.
Okay,
And Melissa and I will put those together and we'll print out new
Okay.
resolutions for you all to read.
awesome. Keep it short. How long do you need?
10 minutes? Yeah, 10
All right.
minutes.
Okay.
I'm happy for that.
We still got several things on the agenda we need to get to, so. All right, so we are going to have resolutions and motions that will move the budgets to the referendum, and I will read them, and then we will vote on them. Is that the way this goes? Okay. All right, move to approve the Board of Selectmen 2019-2020 operating budget in the amount of $23,970,138. to include the following changes from the Board of Selectmen's approved budget. Extraction of Simsbury Farms activity from the general fund to be recorded back into the Simsbury Farms Special Revenue Fund. Increase in the health insurance assumption rate from 10.44% to 12%. Increase in grand list growth projections from 0.85 to 0.92%. It's $18,000. Reduction to eliminate the Economic Development Commission marketing and branding materials, $7,953. Reduction of engineering admin assistant position by 5 hours per week, $77,546. Reclassifications from contingency to the police salary line item, increase the contribution to the Simsbury Farm Special Revenue Fund to $180,000. Reclassification of police vehicles from the CNR transfer line item to the police operating budget. Reclassification of the Public Works plow truck from the CNR transfer line item to the Public Works operating budget. Reclassification of paving from the cash to capital line item to the Public Works operating budget. Increase investment income to $400,000. Transfer $850,000 from the general fund to the health insurance fund. Reduction in the cash to capital line item. Increase the town pensions line item to $934,728. And increase contingency line item by $18,000. So that's the first motion, right?
Yep.
So moved
So moved.
and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, moving on. All right. Move to approve the Board of Education 2019-2020 operating budget in the amount of $70,880,978 and non-public budget of $546,432. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Move to approve the Water Pollution Control 2019-2020 operating budget in the amount of $3,669,347, including Avon and Granby CWF share. Looking for a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You getting these, Karen? All right. Move to approve the Residential Rental Properties 2019-2020 operating budget in the amount of $37,372.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Move to approve the Simsbury Farms Special Revenue Fund 2019-2020 operating budget in the amount of $2,052,282.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Move to approve the debt service and cash for capital appropriation for the 2019-2020 operating budget in the amount of $5,937,284 to include the following changes from the Board of Selectmen approved budget. Reduce sidewalk capital projects by $100,000, reduce greenway capital projects $64,910, and eliminate capital reserve contribution of $50,000. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Move to approve the Capital and Non-Recurring Fund 2019-2020 operating budget in the amount of $1,123,860, including $416,350 appropriated to be funded by the Capital and Non-Recurring Fund, $434,990 appropriated to be funded by one-time cash for capital transfer, $100,000 appropriated to be funded by state's Town Aid Road Fund, $100,000 appropriated to be funded by the Sewer Use Fund, $51,520 appropriated to be funded by the Police Private Duty Fund, $21,000 appropriated to be funded by the Eno Trust Fund. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Move to adopt resolutions of the Board of Finance. The reading into the minutes of the full text of the resolution set out below was waived. Copies of the resolutions having been made available to those in attendance and recorded in these records immediately preceding these minutes. Resolutions resolved that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the following projects. Move to approve Greenway improvements I'll do all of these, and then we can move them together. I think we can do that. Move to approve Greenway improvements in the amount of $100,000 to be funded with cash. Move to approve highway pavement management in the amount of $1,185,000 to be funded with cash, grants, and bonds. Move to approve sidewalk resurfacing in the amount of $200,000 to be funded with cash. Move to approve the accounting system in the amount of $350,000 to be funded with cash. Move to approve the underground tank replacement at Terrafil and Simsbury High School in the amount of $325,000 to be funded by bonds. Move to approve district security improvements in the amount of $750,000 to be funded with bonds. Move to approve the Simsbury High School partial roof replacement in the amount of $2,600,000 to be funded with bonds. Need a motion for all of those.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Just clarification, these are the items that will be on the referendum and are to be voted? They're all over $100,000, true? No?
The 4 questions were in the.
Oh, we get to
Yeah,
that.
they're the next one to read.
All right, sorry. Don't think, Rob, just read. Fiscal year 19-20, the Board of Finance final resolutions and referendum questions. Pursuant to Section 808 of the Town Charter, the following motions were introduced at the regular meeting of the Board of Finance on April 23, 2019. Be it resolved that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Selectmen annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020 shall be approved and implemented in the amount of $23,970,138. Be it resolved that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Education annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020 shall be approved and implemented in the amount of $70,880,978. Be it resolved that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of sewer use fund, sewer treatment plant, residential rental properties, Simsbury Farms special programs, non-public schools, debt retirement, capital, and capital non-recurring annual budgets for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020 shall be approved and implemented in the amount of $12,242,717. In accordance with Sections 406, automatic referendum, and 808, duties of the Board of Finance on the budget of the Charter, the recommended operating budgets will be submitted to a referendum in the following forms. Questions for the referendum ballot. Shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Selectmen annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020 be approved and implemented in the amount of $23,970,138? Question 2. Shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Education annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020 be approved and implemented in the amount of $70,880,978? Question 3. Shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of sewer use fund, residential rental properties, Simsbury Farms special programs, non-public schools, if I didn't have a sore throat before, I got one now. Non-public schools, debt retirement, capital, and capital non-recurring annual budgets for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020 be approved and implemented in the amount of $12,242,717. And question 4, shall the town of Simsbury appropriate $2,600,000 for partial roof replacement at Simsbury High School and authorize bonds and notes in the same amount to finance said appropriation? Do we have to vote on those, or those? No, those.
Second the resolution and then.
Yeah, second the
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, Melissa. So it's the capital, what's the threshold for the capital that goes to the referendum?
2%.
Huh?
2% of the operating budget.
Okay.
Good?
All right, so back to our overall agenda. We're good with all of that, right?
Yeah, can we just, for the record, just recap that this is what you are not recommending, but this is what you're thinking in terms of,
Yes,
so that we can
yeah.
send out the budget
So for the
mailer.
record, the Board of Finance has discussed robustly the budgets that are being recommended to referendum and the impact that they will have on the mill rate to be charged if approved. And indications are that that would be an increase of 2.47% in the mill rate from 36.42 to 37.32, or 0.9 mils.
Yeah, that's not happening.
All right?
Thank you.
I don't think we need to go into any reason, all the other reasons.
No.
That's not.
No, that's
Okay. All right. So we have very rapidly gotten through 4 of our 15 agenda items, including call to order and pledge of allegiance. Approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. I already complimented Karen. They were very succinct.
Too late for the school business manager.
School business manager report to be deferred.
Yeah.
Finance director's, huh?
Yes.
Finance-
School business manager, he just said that you can ask him, you can email him, call him with any questions you have. Finance director's report, under grants and donations, again, this is just a listing of the grants and donations approved by the Board of Selectmen in February and March that I typically update you on. The tax abatement for volunteer firefighters and ambulance personnel. This is an ordinance that was updated with 2 main changes. The first one being that there was a language correction previously omitted in error that now includes the retiree benefits. And then the second one is that they're no longer providing a benefit to residents providing service to non-Simsbury fire departments.
Can you explain the retiree benefits thing?
We talked about this.
Sure. So the previous versions of this ordinance had included a benefit for folks that had 25 years of active service. So, a lot of the older members who were essentially retired from active service, and that this particular benefit would be extended to them. The ordinance had some minor updates in 2016, and there was actually a Scrivener's error, and somehow during the updating of that and the final version that was actually produced, that whole section was accidentally omitted. And we just discovered that within the last few months. I think it was around the holidays we discovered that that Scrivener's error had occurred. So this correction would essentially be correcting that omission.
Because you've actually paid it in accordance of, this wouldn't actually affect the budget at all, right?
Right,
Because
exactly.
you've been acting as though it was done correctly.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I thought we had addressed something along.
Well, there was a submission item anyway. This is, yeah.
Long ago.
Yeah.
Months ago.
So this is correcting an error, basically.
Yes.
What else? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So do
Are you rushing
I
me?
didn't mean it to do that.
All right, so let's move on. On to the next page, the tax abatement request for Ensign Bickford.
Do we need to vote on something
No.
to fix that?
It's
Okay.
just nope, Board of Selectmen already did it, it's just for
Okay, great.
your information. There is a new tax abatement request that has come into the town of Simsbury, that the Business Development Incentive Committee is going to review on April 29th. At 5:30. There's going to be a packet that's posted on Friday related to the abatement request. So if you want more information on that, that's not in the packet, you can reach out to myself or Maria, and we can get that for you before Monday.
We just ask a question. Our board did request that you bring these to our board for review so that we could give feedback to our representative. It looks like that is not happening. I think that that's a concern of mine in terms of process and transparency. As long as we do have the information, we can send individual comments to Rob, but it does not permit the open conversation in front of the public. If you'll recall, Bloomfield got in quite a bit of trouble about when they weren't open and transparent about the process. So just to the extent you can plan for it going forward, it would be great to give us an opportunity to discuss it and give feedback to our
I
representative.
think that would require a policy change from the Board of Selectmen. So we do have a policy where the process for the abatement review is outlined in detail, which includes the review by the Business Development Incentive Committee as well as the Board of Selectmen. So I think to incorporate that, it would be adding a third layer of review. The Business Development Incentive Committee process is done in open session.
So we would not have a say in that, but we would like, Rob is our representative, and we are not in a position to give him any feedback. So how is he going to do that if we,
So we'll have the information on Friday. This is not ideal, but we'll have the
Yeah.
information will be public on Friday, and we'll endeavor to get it to everybody by email. And then you guys can contact me. The meeting is the following Friday, right? Is that right?
Monday.
Following Monday.
So we'll have 2 days that are not business days
Yeah.
to look at it.
All right. So will
I mean,
I.
I can certainly
Yeah.
share that request with the Board of Selectmen to see if they're willing to, entertain adding a third step. in the
well, it doesn't
process,
need to
but
be a step for them, it's just,
It does add
help-
time, it does add time to the review process. It really
Right.
would be an additional step, and it would be a change to the policy. But it's certainly, feedback I can pass along and share with them that there would be an interest in that.
since it is a budgetary item, it will have an impact. You might want the feedback from the Board of Finance on it.
Right. My understanding is the intent of the committee was that there was a representative from various, key agencies, just to get a sense or, a
Yeah,
feel.
precisely, but I'm just saying
So
that the
what's-
key
what's
interest
the-
doesn't have an opportunity to consult with his board. If we,
Is there some time pressure, just out of curiosity, like, to get the packet on Friday and make a final decision on
there is
Monday?
urgency
Seems
with this particular request, and we will be setting up a special meeting of the Board of Selectmen thereafter, depending on the outcome of the recommendation of the committee.
Okay, so this is not the normal kind of time frame you would go through, because I know in the past, some years before, there was a lot more time to.
Well, we have hell of a time getting everybody to get together for a meeting, but that doesn't answer the question about why the information isn't ready before.
Yeah, I mean, to
Yeah,
get it on
so-
Friday and make a decision on Monday just
Yeah.
seems precipitous.
It is a tight window.
But that's not the normal process. This is because there's some
We
emergency.
try to get the materials out about a week in advance of the committee. But again, there was some difficulty, there were some complexities with this particular case, as well as just difficulty getting everybody together. It's, 5 committee members, it's 4 key staff members, and then of course it's also the company that's making the request to the town. So it's
Yeah.
just a lot of schedules to coordinate and to try and make that happen.
So I'm curious to know what emergency there is that if they don't get a tax abatement, something's going to burn down. But
you
I guess
able
we'll
to
find
share the
out.
Don't say blow up, because that.
Yeah, that would be a bad analogy.
All right, I'll make sure you guys have an opportunity to look at it before I go, all right?
Yep.
Okay, next.
Health insurance fund. So after the finance director's report, there is the tax abatement for the volunteer firefighters, just the changes to that. And then the page after that is the health insurance fund called fund projections. So I was just going to take you through that quick.
My thing got all messed up. It was a nice order. Okay, where are we now? Amy, I'm sorry.
It says health insurance fund and it says fund projections. It's like 2 pages after the
Oh, yeah,
finance
yeah, I
director's
got it,
report.
I got it.
So at the Board of Finance's direction, they had wanted me to look into the solvency of the fund and what the potential issue was in years past. So if you look at this breakdown, you'll see the 2019 estimated. This is the end of year projection where I think the health insurance fund is going to end up as of 6/30/19. That's your first column. And then your second column, you have Gallagher's budget. So they were our prior consultants for the health insurance. If you look under total expenditures and you look at Gallagher's budget, it's set at $13,975,000. So these are the claims that they projected along with the admin fees and the stop loss insurance that they thought the fund was going to expend during fiscal year 19. So Based on these expenditures, they build their revenue budget, which is based on the premiums and the RX reimbursement. So if you look directly above that, their total revenues projected are $13,975,000 with no increase to fund balance.
And HSA funding and insurance refunds,
Those are just included in the claims and the premiums of Gallagher's. I was getting there. But those are just an offset to one another. They really should equal each other out pretty much, pretty evenly. It should be at a zero net impact.
so I'm sorry, Amy, I'm just not following. So I get the premiums where they were pretty close on that. And they budgeted zero revenue from HSA funding?
Yeah, so if you look at the HSA funding under the revenue side, it's $542,166. And then if you look at it on the expenditure side, it's $554,567. Theoretically, those numbers should be the same. I'll probably have to look at the accounting of this one, but they should zero each other out. There should be no impact to the
And the
fund.
HSA funding is from the town or from the individuals? It's from the town?
It's from the town,
Or the
Okay.
board.
Or the board.
Depending on.
in this case.
Right, yeah, but our funds, and insurance refunds, obviously, okay.
Yep. So, as you can see, the total expenditures with the offsetting revenues, if you look in the variance column, you'll see that the major variance here is your claims. So we are under projected claims, we're like $829,000. Luckily, we had some offsetting revenues that were unexpended through insurance refunds and an increase in the RX reimbursement that we didn't expect to get, and then a little increase in the premiums as well. So this offsetted the $830,000 loss, so the projected loss in the variance would be $625,000. So now, under the 2019 estimate, you can see that the net change in fund balance is projected to be $374,000. If you took out that $1 million as the transfer in, your projected loss and change in fund balance would be that $625,000. So, just looking at this overall, you can see the only major discrepancy is with the claims. So I can't speak for prior years. I tried going back to Gallagher, our representatives. We had a couple of them. They no longer work there. I tried going back to prior finance directors' emails to see if I could get the budgets. I couldn't get them. I talked to Burke. I talked to Sean. They don't remember ever getting a budget from Gallagher other than the one that was received in 19, or nothing that was that succinct where it portrayed itself as a budget. So I can't speak to prior years, but I can speak to 2019, and just looking at this analysis, it's pretty clear to see that the reason is underestimation of the claims. And if you underestimate your claims, you underestimate your premiums.
Of course, sure. Yeah.
So I just wanted to give you an update on what I was able to find.
And I just want to say thank you for bird dogging it, because it just makes me feel better. I mean, I know you did go back and you had Cigna tie out prior years and
We did.
that it all worked
Yep.
the way it was meant to, and so that made me feel better.
Okay, good.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, that is it for my finance director's report.
Okay. So next up is the appointment of auditors for 18-19.
You guys are all probably pretty familiar with this. It's something that happens every year and required by the state of Connecticut. We did issue an RFQ this year for auditing services, and we had a panel that was put together to interview the firms, and ultimately Bloom Shapiro was selected. We entered into a contract for 3 years with an option to extend for 2 years, so this will be year 1 of the current contract. So I just need your formal motion in order to make the submission to the state that they are our auditor for fiscal year 19.
I move that we designate them as our auditor, Bloom Shapiro.
Second.
Second, moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Budget status report. Did we do that already? No.
No, I took you through the capital funds.
Okay.
So the budget status report, just a couple things I wanted to share that I didn't share during previous budget status reports, is the education cost sharing grant. The state of Connecticut did release their finalized ECS entitlements, and Simsbury entitlement is reported at $6,028,199, and this exceeds our budgetary estimates by $626,000.
That's good.
Building permit revenue, The town received building permits for the current year in the amount of $613,000. That was related to Deepwater Wind Solar Project. This is not included in the budget status report figures in the financial statements as of March 31 because the funds were just received on April 16th, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And as of current, the building department fees are in excess of budgetary estimates of $278,000 with this money coming in.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, sure.
One is on the investment revenue, but not so much a question as
Oh, sure.
a comment. Very nice to see that we're enjoying much better revenue than budgeted. And I know that in the budget we just voted on, we added $150,000. But $150,000 is not even close to the excess that was here. It's a bit, I meant to bring this up during our budget discussion, but a little late for that now. But do you anticipate that we will continue to have this kind of performance in the investments? I mean, are they invested in the kinds of instruments that are pretty predictable, or if we have a recession next year, will it plummet, or?
No, our investments right now are pretty steady. We're invested in some treasuries and some CDs. So I don't think that there would be a huge change.
So should we have actually not done 150,000, but 450,000 of an increase?
No, well,
No.
did we just budget for a higher amount this year?
We had, during
did,
our
right?
revenue estimates at the manager's level, we had bumped that up to, I believe it was 250, and then the 150 that you did would bring the overall budget
Okay.
number to
All right.
400 for the 1920 projections.
Wasn't remembering that. Okay, thank you. And then, this probably isn't under our authority at all, so you can tell me to shut up. But sewer use funds, I'm just looking at the fund balance of $6.4 million. And maybe we don't, because they have their own board, right?
Yes.
And do they ever talk about, do they really need to be holding on to that kind of quantity of money?
So they do review that, and this is actually probably go down before year end. But in conjunction with that, they do review that, and they actually are using some of their fund balance in the fiscal year 20 budget, upcoming budget. But they know that their fund balance is a little high, and they'll plan on using some of that.
Struck me that way too, because I don't pay sewer, I have my own. But still, it seemed like, well, maybe they ought to give the people who pay in some kind of relief.
Yep, they're aware of it.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want me to go through any more of major highlights, or to save time, did you just want to ask questions, or?
I didn't have any other questions.
I know that there is a lot in this packet. It's something that you all are typically able to see during review of the CAFR at year end, but now I just put it in for quarterly review, given, you ultimately have the fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah.
So you should be seeing it more often than once a year, and especially with the issue related to the health insurance fund.
These are all these completed things.
I just had one question. On the Youth Service Bureau grant, that's all zero, right? But on revenues, did we not get that grant this
We
year?
just haven't received it yet.
But we're still anticipating it?
We will.
Okay.
Anything else on these? I mean, there's a lot of information here, that's for sure.
We moving on to.
Hearing none, moving
project
on.
transfers?
Yeah. All right, proposed capital project transfers.
So Maria has the detail on these. If you want her to do a brief overview of the projects, or if you are comfortable with moving forward with the motions, it's up to you. How do you want to proceed?
So can you just give us a short background? These transfers are being done to clean up projects that are finished?
No, so
No.
two of the projects are,
Oh, they've gone negative.
they essentially were underfunded. And so the Public Works garage improvements, that particular project is about $250,000 short. So we have not, we did go out to bid for that project. We have not entered into a contract with any vendor because of the shortage. And so we took a look and did an analysis of our town aid road fund, and that was included in the packet. And what we're proposing is that because that fund balance is very healthy, that we would essentially reallocate salt expenditures and certain paving expenditures from the operating budget in the amount of $250,000 to the town aid road fund. That would then free up about $250,000 in the operating budget that we could do to the capital project to, in order to be able to complete the project.
So I did go through this. It seems like it's something we need to do.
But they're just gonna pay more money for their shortage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need a motion, so the motion would be to approve the proposed capital project transfer request as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Seconded by Lisa. All in favor, say aye.
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 You have to do it for each one, or not? Yeah?
We could,
No, it just said as presented. So that actually covered all of them, so if you wanted to finish going through the other two projects, or if you guys are all comfortable.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
You good?
I mean, that's what
It was,
the action, because
All right, so we're good on that. Supplemental appropriation requests.
Yes. So, in my finance director's report, I tell you all the donation and the grants that the Board of Selectmen have approved. And the majority of these grants and donations go into special revenue funds, but from time to time, they do go into a budget that's a legally adopted budget. And in this case, there's one donation that went into a capital project fund, and then another grant that went into the general fund to be spent. So in order to change those budgets, since they are legally adopted, the Board of Finance has to approve the changing of those budgets and grant permission to increase those budgets by the revenue received.
All right.
I move that we increase the budgets by the amount of donations they received.
Right.
Do we, yeah. we
Yeah.
have to vote on it, all in favor?
Yeah, it's, the motion is as presented. Somebody moved by
Yeah, moved
Linda?
and seconded.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, 1819 Health Insurance Fund Transfer Request.
Yes. So during the fiscal year 19 budgeting process, the Board of Finance had made two motions when they were discussing the budget at one of the public hearings. They voted to transfer $1 million from the general fund reserves to the health insurance fund. And then they also voted to utilize $1 million of the general fund reserves to provide tax relief by offsetting the mill rate. Unfortunately, only one of those $1 million uses of reserves was incorporated into the budget that went to referendum, and the $1 million to be transferred to the health insurance fund was not in the budget that went to referendum. So we discussed this with legal counsel, and it's their opinion that the Board of Finance should make another motion for a supplemental transfer for the $1 million to go from the general fund reserves to the health insurance fund to make it official, since the voters did not vote on it.
Okay, again,
Yeah, moved as presented.
just one comment.
yeah, so the numbers that we were talking about earlier have both $1 million in it or not?
this is for.
This is for 18-19 budget.
Yeah, this is last year.
Yeah.
She made the
This is
transfer in
just-
September
Right,
from
I'm
last
sorry,
year's budget.
the year we're in.
Correct.
right.
Correct.
Current year budget, you're right.
So did you anticipate in the numbers you showed us for the
Yes.
fund balance,
Has
assigned
both
and unassigned?
millions.
Okay, all right. I thought so, but I wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, because this isn't a budgeted item, it will need a recommendation from the Board of Selectmen, so you'll follow up with that.
Which will happen on Friday.
Yep, Friday morning.
Okay.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Proposed Retirement Plan Subcommittee Memorandum of Understanding.
So this is something that we brought forth to you back at the February meeting for you all to review. You had some changes. You asked that legal counsel take a look at the agreement, and that the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen also review and come back with any of their thoughts. No changes were made to the agreement subsequent to your changes. It now has the town attorney's stamp of approval. So we just wanted to bring back the final version and have you all move to authorize Rob Pomeroy as the chair of the Board of Finance to sign the agreement.
So can I just ask a question? Because and I may be looking at not the latest of the drafts that we did, but I actually thought that there was one little paragraph, and it's not that big a deal, but that was left off at the very end. The last version I looked at had a paragraph that was G or F, I guess it would have been F.
And that was struck. That was struck at your meeting.
Was it struck at our meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so I just didn't have that in my notes. Okay, thank you.
I mean, we pretty much loaded up what we sent back and they said yes.
Yes,
Did we ask for enough?
exactly.
Well, since it's our policy, they couldn't
Yeah.
really say no, but
Exactly.
All right, so I move we
All right,
adopt.
so I signed this and I'll give it to you, all right?
I just,
Oh,
we
we
need to
already
vote.
adopted it.
No, we got to move.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Amy, do you have scheduled I know what part of it is the pension thing in the spring, and we're almost done with spring. I don't know if that's going to be scheduled in May or June.
Yeah, we can have them come out in June, do like a full year review and then start on the quarterly.
Or twice a year. I think we limited it, right?
Oh, yes, we did. You're right, twice a year.
So now that we have that MOU, can we go forward and adopt our full policy on, because that was the whole thing, you wanted to have an MOU between the three boards before, but there was a larger policy to go along with it. Right?
Yep.
Which policy are you referencing?
You mean the investment policy?
You
I
did
don't have it with me, it was the.
Oh, I think it's the retirement plan
The
subcommittee's
was it the pension investment policy, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah. So, and we had a draft of that was
We did.
pretty close to final, so maybe we can put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
We'll go back and look at
Yeah.
that. We'll go back and look at that. I think you had that on a previous agenda, but we'll go back and take a look.
We did have it on previous agendas, and we didn't adopt the policy until the MOU was going to be
The
agreed to
changes,
by
yeah.
everybody. So now we
Yeah.
need to go back and actually
Okay.
adopt the policy.
All right. Can we just summarize dates now for the next meetings? Because
That's a good idea.
I think, they're only official when we get the invite from Maria, but that doesn't mean I don't have several others on my calendar already,
Sure.
so.
we have May 14th after the referendum at 8:30, and that would essentially be to set the mill rate. And then in
That's
June-
at Henry James,
Henry
right?
James, correct, right. And then in June, we would be back to your normal schedule.
What's
So,
the June date?
June 18th.
June 18th?
June 18th, correct.
That's 5:40, this is a referendum, okay.
Maybe, Amy, if you could, on the agenda's future, just list the remaining dates for the year at the bottom.
Sure.
Then we'll always have it.
That's a good idea, just because,
And then the public knows too.
yeah. All right,
Or the next one.
and then the most important agenda.
So moved.
I move we adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.